Today I want to talk to you guys about how to read Old Testament narratives. It's really important because if you open your Bible, most likely you're going to open it to an Old Testament narrative. I think it's like around 50 or 60% of the whole Bible. It's a little bit different than reading a New Testament letter, because if you read Ephesians, for example, it's very direct communication. Paul will say things like, "Be angry and do not sin." That doesn't happen so much in Old Testament narrative. What happens is Moses tells the story of Cain and Abel. And so it's a little bit different how you read it. The first thing you have to do is it's not just God giving you commands, but it's God telling you a story. Now I want to say that it is a story, it's historical. Everything that is written in the Old Testament actually happened, but it's not just mere history. It's not like Moses wrote down and says, well, I'm not going to think about anything, I'm just going to write down exactly what happened. But instead, it's very purposeful. Moses is choosing what to write on purpose to teach us things. And so when you're reading it, don't just think, well, he's just writing this to write this, but think there's a reason why he's telling this story. That's really helpful. So it's not just history, even though it is history, it's theological history. It's ministry as history, if that makes sense. So when you're reading a story, you need to ask yourself, what is this story for? Like, what is the author trying to get at? Like, what's the purpose of this whole thing? Here's 3 quick, really easy ways to maybe get at the heart of the purpose of the story. Number 1 is look for good examples and bad examples. When you're reading a text, one thing you need to realize in historical narrative is the Bible doesn't affirm everything it records. Sometimes the Bible tells a story and the character's a bad dude. And so sometimes we read a story like, well, this Bible character did this, Jacob lied, Moses murdered, and if that's in the Bible, so it must be okay. Just because the Bible records something happening doesn't mean it approves of it. So when you're reading the narrative, you need to think, who is a good example here? Who's a virtuous example? And who is a sinful example? And once you kind of see those examples, you can kind of get the gist of the story. And you can tell that based on God's law, general common sense, reading the narrative in that light. Who's a good example? Who's a good character? Who is a bad example? Number 2, the dialogue is often helpful. See what the characters say, because what Moses writes them as saying is often a big hint of the purpose of the story. And then finally, the main character of every Bible story truly is God. And so what you need to ask yourself is, what does this passage teach me about God? How is God present in this story? What could it possibly teach me about the Lord? Because often woven in these stories, God is always there, and God is always doing something. He's always active, and there's always something that these stories teach us about God. So those are my 3 tips for you to read Old Testament narratives. Look for good examples and bad examples, noting that not everything the Bible records it affirms. That's not how it works. Number 2, focus on the dialogue. And number 3, look for the God focus of the passage. Hopefully this will be helpful to you.